You wake up with your alarm, roll over, and immediately think about your to-do list. Classic. Before your eyes even adjust to the light, your brain's already on the clock, pinging emails, unfinished laundry, your aunt's birthday text you still haven't replied to. You sigh. Another day, another dashboard of mental tabs left open. But what if, just for a moment, you didn't do anything at all? No scrolling, no planning, no fixing. Just stared out the window and let your mind wander like a kid in the backseat of a road trip. Here's the strange, beautiful truth. Doing nothing might be one of the healthiest things you do all day. When your mind drifts, really drifts, the way it does when you lose track of time watching dust motes in the sunlight, you activate something neurologists call the default mode network. Sounds fancy, but it's basically your brain's screensaver. It's what kicks in when you're not focused on the outside world. The irony? This so-called idle mode is where a surprising amount of personal growth, creativity, and emotional healing actually happens. Think about it. When do your best ideas come? Probably not when you're furiously writing a deadline-fueled email. It's during a shower. A slow walk. That moment when your gaze locks on a tree branch swaying outside your window and you forget you're even looking. That's not wasted time, it's restorative time. Mainstream health advice is starting to catch up. Wellness experts now recommend mental white space the same way they recommend 8 hours of sleep or a glass of water in the morning. Your brain, like any machine, needs cooling off periods. Constant mental load, what researchers sometimes call cognitive overcommitment, can literally shrink areas of the brain linked to memory and mood regulation. You're not lazy for zoning out. You're protecting your mental real estate. And here's the delightful fringe benefit: when you daydream, your brain doesn't just take a nap. It starts knitting together ideas, memories, and feelings that might seem unrelated. You remember a song from 5th grade and suddenly get a new idea for how to tackle your fitness rut. You picture yourself walking through a peaceful forest and somehow feel calmer, even though you're sitting in traffic. That's your imagination working overtime to give you relief in disguise. Of course, not all wandering minds end in bliss. Experts still argue whether certain types of daydreaming, like obsessive mental reruns of past conversations, do more harm than good. The content of your mental drift matters. But that doesn't mean you need to shut it down. It just means becoming more mindful of where your imagination goes when it's off leash. And let's be real for a moment, the world is allergic to stillness. You're taught that every second should be optimized. Every blank moment filled. Even waiting in line at the pharmacy feels like a personal failure if you're not multitasking. But here's a rebellious thought: what if not doing is doing? What if letting your mind wander is one of the quietest, kindest ways to come back to yourself? Even physically, you might feel it, a softening in your chest, a loosening in your jaw, the way your breath suddenly deepens when you stop trying to manage every passing thought. This isn't meditation, exactly. It's more like letting your thoughts swing lazily in a hammock, no judgment, no agenda. Now, here's a weird little tidbit: 19th century physicians actually prescribed staring out the window as a cure for nervous ailments. That's right, back before blue light and burnout, people were encouraged to simply gaze and think about nothing. There's something oddly comforting about that. Maybe they were onto something we're just now remembering. So today, when you catch your brain drifting, don't yank it back on task like a disobedient dog. Let it sniff the flowers. Let it wander a bit. That mental leash doesn't need to be so short. Your inner life is allowed to stretch out its legs. There's more to you than your task list. There's a whole other world in your mind, and you don't need a passport to go there. And if you're thinking, yeah, but I don't have time to do nothing, pause. Really pause. That sentence itself is proof that you probably need this more than most. 5 minutes of unstructured daydreaming might actually give you more energy to handle the next 12 hours. It's like a power nap for your motivation, no pillow required. You don't need a mountain cabin or a week off-grid. You just need a moment. A window. A breath. That's it. Let your mind wander. Let it drift past deadlines, past errands, past the noise. There's wisdom there, in the in-between, in the nothing, in the drift. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real habit of healing begins. You're halfway through your third cup of coffee and still feel like you're dragging your legs through wet sand. The checklist is growing faster than your motivation, and no amount of productivity hacks seem to click today. So what do? You scroll. You doom scroll. You guilt scroll. You comparison scroll. Sound familiar? Welcome to the productivity trap, where doing more somehow leaves you feeling like less. There's a certain cultural worship of busyness. You're praised for grinding, for maximizing, for squeezing every drop of energy out of your day like it's a performance review. You wear your exhaustion like a badge of honor. But deep down, you're tired of being tired. And here's the kicker, this constant pursuit of being on is not just exhausting, it's counterproductive. Your brain isn't designed to run 24/7 like a laptop on overheat. It's designed for rhythms. Bursts of focus followed by periods of recovery. If you skip that recovery, mentally, emotionally, even physically, you slowly lose access to the very thing that makes motivation possible, energy. Here's a mainstream fact you don't hear enough: cognitive fatigue can mimic depression. Not just a sleepy kind of tired, but a low mood, reduced interest in activities, even irritability. And yet, when you're caught in the loop of constant doing, your solution is often to do more. But what if motivation didn't come from more effort? What if it came from less pressure? This is where gentle daydreaming becomes a tool rather than a distraction. Instead of bulldozing through your day, you allow your thoughts to float like autumn leaves across your mental sky. No judgment. No goals. Just mental playtime. That subtle release lets you reset the cycle. And here's something quirky for your mental toolbox: the Japanese concept of ma, the space between things. It's the pause in conversation, the quiet moment between two notes in music, the stillness before action. Ma is deeply valued in Japanese aesthetics, yet in the West, we panic when there's a second of silence. But in those gaps, those unproductive pauses, you can hear yourself think. You can even hear yourself heal. Remember when we talked about the default mode network in section 1? It gets another round of applause here. Studies show that allowing yourself to enter this so-called idle state for even 10 minutes can boost motivation for later goal-oriented tasks. It's like letting your car idle for a bit before driving up a steep hill. But the problem is, most of us are terrified of those quiet gaps. Why? Because we associate stillness with stagnation. Yet, experts still argue whether the modern obsession with constant stimulation has actually made us less motivated in the long term. We've got faster tools, smarter devices, and yet more burnout than ever. Let's dial it back to something more personal. Think of a moment you felt truly energized, not hyper, not anxious, but deeply ready. Were you rushing between Zoom calls? Probably not. Maybe you were walking without headphones. Maybe you were making tea. Or folding laundry while your mind drifted to some silly memory of a friend. That's your motivational engine quietly warming up. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it hums. There's real power in micropauses. 1 minute of letting your thoughts wander while washing your hands. 2 minutes of gazing out the window while sipping something warm. A long blink between tasks. These aren't lazy, they're vital. They're the mental version of stretching between reps. And let's talk about guilt for a second, because it loves to sneak into moments of peace. I should be doing something. This isn't productive. Other people are working harder. You know what that is? That's internalized hustle culture whispering nonsense into your ear. You don't need to earn your rest. You're not a machine that needs to meet a quota before it's allowed to exhale. So here's an idea: build rest into your motivation strategy. Really. Schedule a moment to do nothing and protect it like it's your grandma's secret cookie recipe. Call it a reboot moment or a mental drift break if you want to make it sound important. Because it is. And don't underestimate the power of humor here. Daydreaming doesn't have to be poetic and deep. Let your mind wander to dumb hypotheticals. What if squirrels could do taxes? What if your cat had a podcast? That playful, nonsensical side of you is healthy. It keeps your inner critic off balance. It reminds you that you're not just a goal-chasing adult, you're still a curious, creative human being. The goal isn't to float off into la-la land and forget your responsibilities. The goal is to restore the part of you that wants to act, that chooses to move, not the part that feels like it has to grind. Motivation that comes from pressure crumbles fast. Motivation that comes from rest is stickier. It's softer, but it stays. Let's say you start giving yourself even just 5 minutes of purposeful drift during your afternoon slump. You let yourself imagine hiking through a foggy forest, or living in a lighthouse, or baking something for someone you love. Then, poof, you're back. But you're back lighter. Clearer. A little more yourself. And that feeling? That's your energy returning. Not in a frantic, caffeinated way, but in a calm, deliberate way that says, I'm ready now. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You just need to release the guilt of doing nothing, and start using it as a tool. Because every time you pause, you're not stepping back, you're stepping inward. And that's where real, lasting motivation waits. You're walking down the hallway toward, wait, why did you come in here again? It happens. More than you care to admit. The foggy brain, the half-finished thoughts, the way your focus slips through your fingers like sand. You chalk it up to stress or lack of sleep, and sure, that's part of it. But there's a deeper layer, a quieter reason your attention is fading. Your mind has forgotten how to wander well. Strange, isn't it? We think focus is the prize and distraction is the enemy. But the truth is, your ability to concentrate depends on your ability to let your mind drift once in a while. Think of it like blinking, necessary micro-moments your eyes take to stay hydrated and functional. Mental drift is the brain's blink. Here's the mainstream truth bomb. Studies show that alternating between periods of focused work and deliberate mind wandering improves memory retention and task performance. Translation? Letting your thoughts wander in the right way can sharpen, not scatter, your focus. But before you light a candle and start picturing peaceful meadows, let's clarify something. This isn't about zoning out into a 3-hour spiral of overthinking your life choices. We're talking about gentle, casual, mind-noodling. Imagining silly scenes, replaying old movie moments, thinking about how ducks have those weird sideways waddle races. That kind of thing. And here's the cool, nerdy twist. When you engage in positive daydreaming, meaning it's playful, creative, and curiosity-led, you're engaging parts of your brain responsible for problem-solving, empathy, and even moral decision-making. You're strengthening cognitive threads that hold your mental health together. But, yes, always a but, not all daydreams are created equal. Experts still argue whether some types of mind-wandering, especially those loaded with anxiety or regret, can actually decrease attentional control over time. In other words, ruminating can wreck your focus, while light, intentional drifting may just rebuild it. That's why it helps to recognize the difference. Ask yourself, does this wandering feel heavy or light? Is it helping me gently reset, or am I spiraling into mental quicksand? When you catch yourself drifting into something playful, let it ride for a bit. Picture your future self baking the perfect sourdough loaf. Imagine finding a $100 bill in an old coat pocket and deciding to spend it all on warm socks. Let your brain frolic. That frolic is not nonsense, it's recovery. And here's the fringe gem of the day. Some researchers believe that spontaneous daydreaming is linked to creative incubation, a period where your brain subconsciously works out complex ideas. That brilliant solution you had in the shower? That was your subconscious, just casually finishing your homework while you lathered your scalp. Want to train this wandering to focus cycle? Try what some call directed daydreaming. It's like a soft leash on your mind. You pick a topic to gently drift around. Maybe it's visualizing your ideal morning routine, not in a strict, Pinterest-perfect way, but like a scene from a cozy movie. What are you wearing? What are you drinking? What music's playing in the background? This light, sensory mind play starts to rewire your motivation loops in subtle but powerful ways. It's no accident that athletes, performers, and even CEOs use visualization as part of their mental prep. They're not just seeing success, they're rehearsing it emotionally. And guess what? So can you. You don't have to be training for the Olympics to picture yourself calmly starting your day with yoga and warm lemon water. And the best part? These visualized moments don't have to happen in silence or in some perfect meditation posture. You can do them while folding towels, or sipping your morning tea, or lying in bed at night while your mind floats lazily across your ceiling fan's slow rotations. The point isn't to force a result. It's to enjoy the drift. The more you give your brain this space, the more resilient your attention becomes. It's like strength training, but for focus. You alternate stress and recovery, action and stillness. Now let's put this into practice. Let's say you're mid-afternoon, productivity crashing, eyelids heavy. Instead of muscling through with another burst of willpower, you lean back. You close your eyes for 60 seconds. You picture your dream reading nook, big window, soft blanket, cat optional. You let that image bloom. You breathe. Then you return. What just happened? Your nervous system dipped into calm, your brain wandered just enough to restore its energy, and your attention came back a little steadier. You didn't lose that minute, you gained momentum. It's easy to dismiss this kind of practice as fluff. But the science, and your own lived experience, says otherwise. You've felt the difference. That weird creative jolt after a random daydream. That clearer head after letting your thoughts drift on a walk. That strange little aha that lands when you least expect it. You don't need more focus strategies. You need more space. And maybe that's the quiet magic of all this. You're not escaping when you daydream. You're restoring. You're recharging the part of your brain that wants to pay attention, not just the part that has to. So the next time you walk into a room and forget why, maybe laugh. Maybe let yourself imagine a parallel universe where you walked in and found a hidden portal to a coffee shop in the clouds. Maybe that tiny imaginative moment will do more for your focus than another cup of caffeine ever could. You're standing at the sink, rinsing a mug, when a thought drifts in. What if I actually became one of those people who enjoys going to bed early? You smirk. That version of you feels about as mythical as a unicorn that meal preps. And yet, the image sticks. You see yourself slipping under clean sheets at 9:45 p.m., reading a book with no screen in sight, waking up without an alarm, making tea in soft lighting. Your brain paints the scene without asking permission, and suddenly, for just a moment, it feels possible. Welcome to the quiet power of imaginative rehearsal. You might not realize it, but when your mind wanders into fantasies of a better version of you, healthier, calmer, a little more in control, it's not just wishful thinking. It's a kind of practice. And like any good rehearsal, the more you run through the scene, the more natural it feels when it's time to perform. Here's a mainstream gem for you. visualization, when used consistently, can literally strengthen neural pathways similar to physical practice. That's why athletes mentally rehearse their routines. That's why speakers picture a standing ovation before they walk on stage. The brain doesn't always distinguish between what's real and what's vividly imagined. So, when you daydream about taking better care of yourself, you're not just wasting time, you're laying track. The beauty of this habit is how low stakes it is. You don't need to buy anything, commit to anything, or even get out of bed. You just imagine. You let yourself pretend. And no one ever has to know you're doing it. The fringe tidbit here? Some psychologists argue that positive constructive daydreaming may actually be more effective for long-term habit change than rigid goal setting. Why? Because it taps into emotion, not just logic. It makes you feel the habit, not just write it on a checklist. Let's test that. Picture yourself enjoying movement, not dragging yourself through a workout, but actually enjoying it. What does it look like? A walk through a park while your favorite podcast plays? A quiet yoga session with sunlight pooling on the floor? Picture the texture, the color, the feeling in your body. That's rehearsal. That's inner alignment. That's the fuel for action. Here's where it gets interesting. Experts still argue whether visualization alone can cause change or if it simply supports it. But here's the thing, they all agree it helps. It softens the resistance, bridges the gap between intention and reality, and makes new habits feel familiar before they even begin. And when something feels familiar, it feels safer. That's key. Because so much of your resistance to healthy habits isn't about laziness, it's about discomfort. You don't fear the gym. You fear the awkwardness. The unknown. The self-judgment. But when you've already been there in your mind, when you've imagined yourself doing the thing, surviving it, even enjoying it, you reduce the threat. You nudge the needle from maybe someday to actually, maybe today. So how do you do it? Gently. No pressure, no push. Just a soft, recurring return to the scenes that motivate you. Maybe you imagine yourself prepping meals on a Sunday, music playing, fridge stocked with colors. Maybe you picture future you winding down with chamomile tea and 0 emails in sight. Whatever the scene, let it play like a daydream on repeat, simple, cozy, satisfying. And don't worry if the scenes feel silly or far-fetched. That's the point. You're not signing a contract, you're making a mental Pinterest board. You're letting your brain try on new routines like outfits in a fitting room. No shame if some don't fit. In fact, here's a weird trick, exaggerate the scene. Go full fantasy. Imagine your healthy habit life as a soft focus montage, ambient lighting, spa music, flawless smoothie bowls. You're not aiming for realism, you're aiming for resonance. Let the idea delight you a little. That delight will leave a residue. It lingers. It plants seeds. Now, remember when we talked about mental playfulness in section 3? This is its more mature cousin, fantasy with purpose. You're not just entertaining yourself, you're preparing yourself. And when the opportunity to act shows up, when your body has 10 minutes and a yoga mat nearby, you're more likely to say yes. Because here's the secret, visualization isn't just imagining success. It's normalizing it. So when you take that first step toward a new habit, it doesn't feel like a leap into the unknown. It feels like a scene you've visited many times before. And yes, your inner skeptic might roll their eyes. Okay, so I daydream about being a Zen morning person, and suddenly I become one? Well, not suddenly. But steadily. And with less internal resistance. That's worth something. You're allowed to hold both hope and humor. Picture yourself as a healthy, well-rested, green tea drinking badass, and laugh a little. That lightness? That's motivation in disguise. It slips past your defenses and says, hey, you could actually try this. Not perfectly. Not all at once. But soon. Maybe even today. So next time your mind drifts into a fantasy of who you could be if things were just a little easier, don't push it away. Let it play. Let it plant. Let it rehearse. That future version of you isn't here to mock you, they're here to show you the way.